It's a properly cold morning this morning. First proper cold morning this year, I think. I reckon it's probably around about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. So hat and gloves are on. Good morning. Thanks for joining me again, and welcome to part 3 this time of my 35mm film project. So today you join me at Holme Fen, which is a nature reserve near Pt3. And if you've been following my series so far, you'll have seen that I've been out with my old 35mm film camera from many years ago, and I've been shooting some film. Last time I was at Stevington Windmill shooting some Ilford HP5 black and white film, and today it's the turn of Kodak. So I've got some Kodak colour film already loaded into my Minolta, and I'm in search of some woodland landscape images today, and I'll be shooting that alongside my Canon digital camera to compare the results. So let's get cracking and let's see what we can find. So let me talk you through my first composition of the day. So we're just concentrating on this section from around about here to over here. So I'm capturing this tree and the silver birches off to the side. So this is kind of on the left third, if you like, and so we're kind of shooting from there to there. The reason I like this composition is because this tree is obviously the main focal point, and then you've got the background of the silver birches and the brown bracken and the ferns, dead dying ferns over there. But the thing that really drew my eye to this is the foreground just here, and the ferns and the bracken that have caught the frost overnight. So I quite like the white texture of the brown foreground here, and then it leads off into the background. So I quite like that, and then I like the kind of canopy of this big tree just hanging over here. So this is the composition I've got, and that's what we're trying to capture here. I'm shooting at f11 ISO 100 and around about 50mm on the lens, and that one is in the bag. So I'm quite happy with that. I've got my focus peaking switched on, so I know that the foreground to the background is all in focus at f11, and using the 2-second timer obviously just to keep the camera sturdy while the shutter fires. And looking at the histogram, I've captured all the details, all the way from the darks to the whites. So I'm happy with that. I've shot that in a 4:3 ratio. I'm going to reshoot it again in a normal 2:3, and then I'm going to change over to the Minolta and shoot this in colour film. Do a couple of different exposures. Alright, so I've reshot this composition with the Minolta. I've set the lens to around about 60mm, 55mm, which is very similar to the focal length I was shooting with the Canon. And I think I've come up with a very, very similar image. So I've shot around the exposure, so I've kind of manually bracketed and shot an exposure either side of what I think the correct exposure is, just to make sure I've captured it on film. So that's it, that's this composition done. Let's move on to the next one. So the sun's rising now, and the morning light is just picking up on these trees. Fantastic. All right, so I've had to act fairly quickly on my second composition. I've just finished shooting it on the Canon, and just looking down this path in front of me, the trees, the silver birches, are just picking up the light of the rising sun. So I think that looks like a nice composition, and I like the way the pathway leads you through the image as well. So I've shot that on the Canon, and I'm just about to repeat the process very quickly on the Minolta just before I lose the sun on that on those trees. So I'm currently shooting this at a 15th of a second, and I will do another couple of exposures either side just to make sure I have the image on film. So So I'm just taking a bit of time away from the Minolta at the moment. I'm using my Canon camera, but I've put the big lens on because I found a little scene over there which I need to really zoom into, and I just don't have the lens for that with the Minolta. So I'm just shooting this little scene, and it's looking right over there at the silver birches in the distance and the side light from the sun coming up in the morning. So it's picking up a nice bit of side lighting, and it looks quite an attractive little scene. Yep, happy with that. Let's move on. Getting a bit warm now. Right, so I've just found another composition just here. Looking at maybe 5 or 6 trees just here, with this angled tree in the foreground being the focal, like the main subject, if you like. I should be able to shoot this one with my shorter 24-105 lens, which means it's a composition that will work for the Minolta as well. I hope. I really quite like that. So you've obviously got the main subject tree in the foreground, and you've got a sea of brown bracken going off into the distance, and some of the background trees are just picking up some side lighting as well. I'm shooting at f11 and I've got my focus peaking switched on, so all of the image is red from the foreground all the way off into the distance, and all of these trees in the background are sharp as well. So playing back the image that I've just taken, you can see that the histogram is showing that I've got all the details. So I've underexposed by 1 stop, but I'm not clipping any of the shadows. But most importantly, I'm keeping the details and the highlights. So I'm just going to wait for a few minutes just to see if this main tree here in the foreground picks up any slightly stronger side lighting. Then I'll reshoot the image. All right, so I've just framed this one up with the film camera. So I'm just going to shoot this on the Kodak. And just to get a very similar kind of composition, I've zoomed it right in at 85mm. That's the best I can do with this lens, but the image still looks actually pretty good. Maybe a few distractions on the right hand side of the frame, but the main elements are obviously all there. So I'm just going to underexpose this slightly, and I'll overexpose it as well. Right, so I found another composition just here with these, using these 2 trees, and just the shot kind of going off into the background with some more silver birches in the distance. So the thing that appealed to me on this shot is that the silver birches are side lit at the front just here, but the ferns and the heathers and the bracken, whatever it is, in the middle ground, between the front 2 trees and the distance, is picking up some side lighting, or they're being backlit by the sun. So I think it just gives a little bit of texture to the image. The lighting is quite interesting, and obviously the trees at the back there picking up the sun as well. So let's shoot this one, but this time I'm going to shoot first on the Minolta. So let's shoot this on film, and then I'll get the Canon camera out and shoot it in digital. I think ideally I'd probably shoot a little bit longer than 85mm, but that's what I'm restricted to with the Minolta at the moment. So let's shoot it at 85mm and see what it looks like. So I'm just underexposing this a touch because I don't want to clip my highlights. So I'm shooting this one at a 60th of a second. Histogram looks great, so all the highlights and shadows are captured. I quite like that image actually. So let's move on. All right, so I'm in a bit of a different location now in the fen. I've picked this little spot here because there's a couple of different compositions that I've been able to shoot. I've already shot quite a few different options. I had the tripod just down here a little while ago, and I started off shooting with the Canon lens. And there's a couple of trees that I've been shooting. This one just here, which has got a bit of a character to it because it's kind of a bit of a cross-shaped tree. It's just picking up a little bit of subtle side lighting on some of the trunks of the tree, some of the branches rather, and then off into the distance, shooting across the floor of the forest or the fen, whatever you call it. The floor is just picking up a bit of backlighting, so you're getting quite a bit of texture, lots of browns, lots of greens, some of it backlit as well. So I really quite like that shot. So that's the first composition I did. And then over here, there's another couple of trees. Or in fact, it's just one tree, the silver birch there, but the trunk splits off into two branches. So I've zoomed right in close up to that one. So there's almost no sky and none of this dark green tree interfering on the right-hand side of the frame. So that works really well. So from this position, I've used the tripod to shoot both trees with the Canon. Shooting this tree here with the Minolta, that's been okay, but I can't zoom in far enough with the Minolta lens, which is the downside. I've only got a stretch of 85mm on the Minolta lens. So what I've had to do is reposition the tripod. So just a few meters up here, I've repositioned the tripod with the Minolta on there, and I've zoomed right in. And the reason I've done that is just to try and get the dark green tree out of the right hand side of the frame. It's a completely different composition, same subject but different composition, and that's the best I can do. So that's kind of the downside with this film project, and that is the fact that I'm restricted to 85mm on the zoom on the Minolta lens. But I think that should be a couple of really good pictures. I'm quite hopeful about those, so we'll get those on the computer later and have a closer look. So yeah, time to pack up at this location and move on to the next one. Oh, by the way, I'm about halfway through the camera film at the moment, so maybe just over halfway through. So let's see what's next. Alright, so I found one more composition. Whether it's my last one, I'm not quite sure yet, but I quite like the look of this old tree here. So I'm going to get the camera out and shoot this one. Probably zoom in fairly close. Probably just get these, maybe the tree just to the left of it and the two to the right, just there. So I'll shoot that on the Minolta, and then I'll shoot it on the Canon. On the Canon, I might shoot this in a square format. I'm not sure yet. So let's set up and take a look at it. Good. All right, so that's 3 exposures of that one. I have about 5 images left on this roll of film. So a 30th, 2 stops, that's a 15th and an 8th. So an 1/8 of a second at f11 should be the equivalent exposure on this Canon, because I'm shooting at 100. And obviously the Minolta has ISO 400 film. So let's see how this shot compares. and it's giving me a third of a stop overexposed. But the beauty of the Canon is that I've got the histogram to fall back on. So let me get my composition right. Good. So f11. I'm focused on the tree. 2-second timer. And that's my shot. Well, I must say, I think this place is absolutely fantastic. Now, woodland photography I don't find easy at all. I've not actually done that much of it, to be honest with you. But what I can tell from this place, compared to other forests and woodlands that I've been to, is that the floor, the woodland floor, is very clean and tidy. There's hardly any kind of fallen branches or twigs or distracting elements that could be in your photograph. So it is actually a pleasure to walk around and look at. I mean, I think there is just far too much to photograph. So I've tried to be quite selective in what I've been trying to find and look at. But this place is definitely worth a visit, and I'll definitely be coming back. And hopefully, when I do come back, I might be lucky enough to get a bit of mist or fog as well. That would be really good. I think that's the holy grail of woodland photography. Right, so this is the final image I'm shooting. So I'm just looking at this tree as my main subject, and just leading off into the right-hand side of the frame, just capturing the backlit ferns on the ground there. I'm shooting in a 2x3 format on the Canon. I've tried a couple of vertical shots, but they don't really work. I think this is better suited to landscape orientation. So that's the sort of image I'm getting, and it looks quite good. There's just a little bit too much highlight there, but I can bring that back, and I love the way the light is just filtering through. It's quite a nice image to finish on, I think. So I think I'm just going to work this composition a little bit more while I'm here. I've got a couple of shots left on the film, so I'm just going to move around just a tiny bit just to see if I can improve on what I've got. All right, so I found a slightly better composition, because if I've moved further forward and to the right, so I'm not getting this part of the tree in on the right hand side of the image, and then let me show you on the left hand side of the image. Before I had this distraction here, so ideally I wanted to remove those. So by moving over here, I've now got an image which hides the distraction with the main subject tree. I'm still getting the filtered backlight through on the leaves down there, and I'm still getting separation with these two trees just here. So I think that might be a better composition, but we can compare them when they're on the computer. So that was it. That was the last photograph. Time to wind the film back. So I think that's been a pretty productive morning actually. I've shot a whole film of Kodak Ultramax in colour on the Minolta, and I've no idea how many pictures I've shot on the Canon. And that's it. So it's time to send this off to get developed along with the Ilford black and white. There we go, one roll of Kodak, shot on location at Holme Fen. So just a couple of thoughts on my experience this morning with shooting with film. Nothing really more I can say over and above what I said at the windmill. I got better at winding the film on, no problem at all. I found that the focus here was pretty much set to infinity all the time, even shooting at 85mm. That was the setting that was giving me the best focus according to the viewfinder. Don't think that was necessarily the case quite so much on the 24-105 Canon lens. I do find though that at a place like this, you're probably better off shooting with a 70-200 exclusively, I would think. I was intentionally looking for compositions that I could double up with the Canon 24-105 and the Minolta 28-85, so I could get similar compositions and shoot them. So all in all, fairly successful morning, and it's time to get the pictures developed, get the digital images processed in Lightroom, and then compare them in part 4. So that's the plan for part 4. Hope you can join me then. That's where I'll be comparing the images all together and giving my final thoughts on shooting with film, when I've been so used to shooting with digital for the last, what, 22, 23 years, something like that. But I've really enjoyed getting the old Minolta film camera back out again. I loved shooting with it when I had it as a teenager, shooting aircraft at air shows. That's all I used it for. And it's nice to get out the old camera again. It's still quite familiar to me in a strange kind of way. So anyway, that's the plan for part 4. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you then.